at one time in my life when I was in survival mode, living well might have been connected to the things that the society valued more so than what was valuable. So like money and things, right? And so you think having these things will solve your problems. You know what I mean? You envision that people who do have those resources are happy and are have these things that you aspire to have. But as I mature and as I see more of the world, I realize that's not true.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is David Heppard. As the Director of Vision and Values for the Black Rose Collective, which he co-founded, David continues to champion community empowerment and systemic change. He believes that love is the most potent tool for dismantling barriers and fostering healing. David aspires to support individuals to confront their traumas and reclaim their stories, embodying the resilience of the human spirit. The Black Rose Collective is a group of dedicated community organizers and support specialists directed by and accountable to the community, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of the global majority who are incarcerated, impacted by gun violence, or who face ongoing barriers of the integration process after being legally liberated from the carceral system. What's up, brother? How you doing, David?
How you doing, bro? All right, doing good, man. Thank you for asking. How are
Yeah.
you?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to chat with you about life and what the good life means. You've had an interesting background that I think
Yeah.
I'm assuming will likely come up throughout this conversation. And yeah, let's see what happens. I know I just read that bio, but I do like for guests to briefly introduce themselves, say a little bit about yourself that may not be encapsulated in that bio.
No, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Broderick. I really appreciate you creating this space to have these type of conversations. I think these conversations are pivotal and are important, and just us being able to connect around our humanity, I think, is always a gift. And so I appreciate you for creating these spaces with that centered and in mind. Well, you know, I always say that I'm just the community member doing work for and with the community. I think I that's how I view myself. I view myself as somebody who as a child, I caused harm, and I look at the rest of my life as an opportunity to heal and hopefully um, try to be a part of the solution when at one point in time in my life I might have been a part of the problem. And so I think that the real work is trying to continue to progress on our healing journey. I think that's the hardest thing on the planet. Um, and so that's my investment in understanding that we need to heal, and I need to heal, and I need to continue to heal. I believe that people aren't healed, they're always healing. And part of that is because we live in a society that injures us every day, or reopen wounds, it pulls off scabs, it and so I try to stay connected to that work because I understand that it's vital for for me, for all my relationships, and for my community, for that work to happen. And so, but I mean, I came up in a lot of trauma when I was young, and I and I was thrown away by the system at 16, and and you know, I think what that does to you emotionally, the emotional aspects of being thrown away. Uh, because I always say this though, some people say that was the event, but that wasn't the event. I think if you really look at my story, I've been getting thrown away since I was a child, right? And I think I look at actually the system uh, throwing me away officially at 16 was like an exclamation point um, of consistent messaging that I've been getting my whole life, and and so I look at that as a way to access the understanding of not wanting anybody else to feel that way,
Mm.
and so um, I want to be invested in that fight of how we create a society where nobody gets thrown away, where um, everybody can be leaned in for their value and be able to show up with their power and their brilliance. And I think the stories and the system that invests in haves and have-nots is, I think that's over. I think folks are starting to see through the fog. I think the reality is uh, stuff and things doesn't dictate success and happiness. And I think as we start to wake up to the fact that those aren't the things that control those things, I think more of us will start to do our own work in trying to heal and trying to make space for others and create a society that's not as harmful. So that's a little bit. I think, through my lens, that's how I look at it. As far as um, that's who I am. Is I'm just a community member, and I'm just trying to do my part. Um, listen to our brilliant elders who've been doing this work and been holding this for so many years. Um, that's crazy when the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
All right.
Right. And so we young and we thinking we trying to reinvent the wheel. And then you realize as we start to listen to the stories of our elders and the wisdom that they have and all the hardship that has carved out that wisdom, um, you start to realize like, wow, like we're part of the problem if we're not listening,
Yeah.
because we just set the movement back 60 more years. Like we got to experience all this stuff ourselves, and now we believe, now we know it. And so I think I've come into a brand new understanding of and appreciation for those who've come before us. Um, when you listen to old Fred Hampton interviews or old stuff, like the stuff, just the under that, like they're speaking about today. And and so, and not just examples of folks who are well known. I'm talking about people in our own community who've been fighting these fights, and they haven't got a book written about them, and they don't have a biography on YouTube or in anybody's documentary, but they're just as vital, just as significant, just as brilliant, and and what we have and that we don't have in other acts in situations is they're accessible.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Beautiful, David. Love it. You're a community man, and you're interested in goodness. So you're perfect for this conversation. To see what that view of a good life means. But that's wonderful, man. I mean, I love that because I think we're similar in that we have different histories, of course, but we're similar in that. I mean, you're just trying to make the world a better place, man. You see so much suffering growing up, and you're like, wow, man, it doesn't have to be this way. And you learn. as you go along, that how do I give back to the community? How do I help the community in some capacity heal? And there's different ways of healing, of course, as you know. And then how do we listen to our elders along the way? I think I have a very similar path in that, you're young, you think you know a lot more than you you do. I'm reading everything. I'm thinking I know all this stuff. And, especially in your late 20s, 30s, boy, you think you know everything. And yeah, I mean, that's really important to me. This podcast, most of the people I've interviewed have been elders because I
Mm,
think it's important to sit down and have a conversation with people who've had experience in life. And even if they've made a lot of mistakes, that's a lot of wisdom to gain from those mistakes. They're leaving the world and they're like, hey, man, I made a lot of that was dumb. But here's what I learned from it. Or, maybe they've made some great choices and like, hey, here's what I learned from this. I'm with you on that 100%. And yeah, that older wisdom is an important piece. So I love how you're describing yourself as a community person, as a student of the elders, as someone who's open to learning. That's just beautiful, man. Um,
absolutely. And it's me and a friend of mine were just talking about some of the revolutionaries and some of these folks in our community, and we were talking about how young a lot of them were,
you're right.
right? And we are and so I was asking my question. So not just being able to listen to our elders, right? But it's like, are we? The question was asked, like, where are they now, though? Like the young folks now, and I'm like, but is that because we're not listening? You know what I mean? Like, are we not making space for that brilliance to show up now? And so I always try to stay connected to that as well, where because when I had that conversation, it really resonated, and I was like, are we I think in our mind we view ourselves as that young person, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our mind and stuff like that, we're that person, and but the reality is, I mean, some of these folks was early 20s, and as I start to try to listen and make space, man, there's brilliance is starting young. Like they talking about it. They might not be talking about it in the way that we're accustomed to talking about it, but maybe that says more about my need to grow and expand than it does about them needing to learn how to speak differently or more effectively. Like, I mean, times are changing. Like, and I think we have to so I just always want to name that, like it's just like we got so much brilliance in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just appreciate that, and that's kind of my what fuels my cup or keeps me inspired, is um because even though the stuff is still happening, even though they still killing us in the street, even though they still throwing away our babies and our kids, locking them up for 50, 60, 70 years, and even they still disenfranchising us, and all this stuff is still happening, and the same stuff that they were talking about back in the 60s, right? Being able to see our community lean into their collective power. Like you start to see that. Like I know I've seen folks in the community, some of the youth and some of the and you see the older folks and folks of my peers. I see more and more folks starting to really lean into their brilliance and their power. And that um I think that inspires me, because if I just look at the results from a transactional lens, I'll be very, very disappointed about where
Mm-hmm.
we are now than where we are. I mean, the fact that the wealth gap is the same as it was in Reconstruction would be like that'd be debilitating if that's all you looked at was those
Yeah.
metrics. But when you see our community start to galvanize around this work and build. And that's why I appreciate about you in this platform and being able to have these conversations, because I think it's all hinged to our ability to heal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because as we heal, then we can show up in our brilliance. As we heal, then we can lean into our power. The reason why we don't is because of our unhealed trauma. I remember there was a quote that I always resonated with. It said, we need to heal as a community so we stop passing off our trauma as culture.
Bingo. Woo. Exactly. Exactly. Well, speaking of which, I
Yeah.
love it. So what does it mean? Because this conversation is about that. I
Hmm.
inspiring at least some reflection on what does it mean to live a good life. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have a good life, to live well, or what is a life worthy of living? Those are different ways of framing that. So what does
Mm.
that mean for you? And then we'll explore some of those themes that you've already brought up, I'm sure, as it relates to this overall philosophy of yours about what does it mean to live well.
Um, what does it mean to live well? I think it's important to name that. I think when you have historically not gotten your needs met, right? I think that changes your definition of what living well might be. You know what I mean? If you're accustomed to not having safety, and you're accustomed to not um, having care, and you're accustomed to like these things that we think are basic human rights, that can change uh, what you believe to be what your definition of what living well is. And so I just want to separate, like, at one time in my life when I was in survival mode, living well might have been connected to the things that the society valued more so than what was valuable. So like money and things, right? And so you think having these things will solve your problems. You know what I mean? You envision that people who do have those resources are happy and are have these things that you aspire to have. But as I mature and as I see more of the world, I realize that's not true. Resources don't do that. And so that's the one thing about uh like I said, when I was incarcerated, I had de facto life sentence. I was never supposed to come home, right? And there's something about um sitting in those oppressive circumstances without an end date. You know, there's some folks in there, they find solace in the fact, like, listen, this is going to be over in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Like, when you deal with something tragic or traumatic in there, you're like, man, this ain't forever. You know what I mean? And you start to put all your focus on when I get released, right? But when you don't have that as something to lean on, right? And you don't have that, and every situation is is debilitating, and is devastating, because it's like, this is forever. Like you know what I mean, when an officer is messing with you and tore your cell out, or then unjustly threw you in the hole or something like that, it's like they can always do this, and like there's no, and there will never be an end. And there's something about having to find um peace in those circumstances that have allowed for me to change my understanding that resources and money and all that other stuff isn't going, it doesn't do it. you know what I want is peace. What I want is
Mm.
peace of mind. What I want is the ability to be around people who care about you. You know what I mean? What I want is compassion and empathy. What I want is connection to other people, right? We live in a society that's disconnecting, and a lot of us have gotten our trauma through the disconnecting. And being disconnected from our caregivers, or being disconnected from folks who are supposed to love us, right? At these pivotal moments in our lives. And so I think that trying to find purpose and peace in a circumstance that didn't have it, made me realize that those things aren't outside of ourselves. In that regard, I think there was a lot of healing I had to do, but there was all these other intangible things that go into me living well. And so when I'm have community, folks who generally care about you and your well-being, um and who make space for your voice, and um see your humanity. They're connected to your humanity. They understand that you're more than the worst thing that you've ever done in your life. You know what I mean? You are, somebody's son. You know what I mean? Somebody's uncle, somebody's brother. You know what I mean? Like, I think that having that is what I would define is living well. Is
Mm.
it's relationships. At one point in time in my life, I thought it was resources. Now I'm realizing that it's more about relationships, and that is the markers of how well you're doing.
Mhm. Beautiful, man. That's a lot there to unpack, and you know, the thing that you said from the very beginning, and there's a lot of reason why we're having these conversations on this podcast as well. Is it's contextual about how you see it.
Mm,
Depends on the conditions that you found yourself in.
yes.
Depends on the conditions that your narrative was nurtured, meaning that the environment that you grew up in and those conditions that shape the way one thinks about the world, all of that is going to inform what your perspective is on what living well means. You mentioned that it's a process, that it evolves over time, and it evolves based on the conditions that you find yourself in, and the way that a lot of us perceive what a good life is going to be predicated on those um, initial conditions from which we grew up in, and that
Mm,
means a family dynamic. It means the community dynamic outside of
mm,
that. That means the city dynamic, the county dynamic, state, nation, global. All of those different pieces are impinging on us on a regular basis. And there are some fundamental things that are a part of what living well means that you mentioned: peace, love, compassion, these types of qualities of experience, um, community and relationships. All of these things are important, and those are, I think, fundamental things that everyone can agree on. But I
mm,
love how you started this, because we have to look at it with a little more nuance. What is the situation? How does one see that based on their experience?
mm,
You're right. A lot of us, I know I did. I think most people in this country, anyway, just the way this country is designed, is having shit, having stuff, resources is what's going to make you happy. And that defines what a good life is. And yes, it's good to have enough to make sure your basic needs are covered. I think you mentioned that earlier. Absolutely. And have some freedom. Financial freedom is definitely valuable and important. But if we're solely depending on that, that's not what's going to make our lives well. And I think you're sharing a little bit of your story, and you can share as much as you like throughout this conversation about being incarcerated, where man, you were really constrained, um, and you had to find another way because it wasn't like, well, there's nothing I can do about this situation. This is going to happen. You had to go deep inside and find a level of inner peace that allowed you to have a steady mind and be able to deal with whatever life brings you. Um, and that's an important part. I think we all can learn from it, even those of us who haven't been incarcerated.
mm.
And we've had different kinds of experiences that were challenging, but we can learn from that. From you, like you were in a very intense situation, very constrained situation, and you realize that, wow, if I don't have inner peace, I'm not going to survive. And I think that that's something that we all can learn from.
No, absolutely. And I want to name. I always think it's important, especially when I tell my story, is that it wasn't like I came to these conclusions on my own, right? Like it was some folks from the outside came in and gave me empathy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I always want to just name that, especially how significant it is for those of us who've caused great harm, right? Is um sometimes we need permission to heal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I always want to name that because all of the worst things you could have said about me or can say, right? um I used to think those about myself too, though. Like it wasn't like, and I probably thought worse than even that, you could frame it, right? And so to believe that means to believe that I didn't deserve to heal. I didn't deserve to be happy. I didn't deserve these things. Like, I really believe what that judge told me when I was 16 years old. I really believe what those teachers told me, and what some of these adults have poured into me. Like, you know what I mean? I was a wasted life. And I believe that too. You know what I mean? Some people want to remind me of that because of my background. I believe that too. Believe me, I believed it. And it was this amazing couple who gave me grace, man, and just gave me empathy, you know, and just found it within their heart to make me feel loved, right?
Mm.
And it just hit different, right? And gave me permission to heal. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about the people I needed to forgive, and then I remember they said, you know, when are you gonna forgive you? You know what I mean? Like, when are you gonna put you
Mm.
on that list? Like, when are you gonna get that opportunity to be able to forgive yourself? And it was so powerful for me, right? Because I think, especially a lot of, if you didn't caused harm, and folks who are incarcerated, I think that environment it's reinforced every day about how valuable we are or not valuable we are to the society, right? It's reinforced every day, and a lot of folks believe it.
Mm.
And I always say that the last um, barrier for me to really get on my healing journey and begin that journey of trying to become the best version of myself was, um, what if it doesn't matter? Like, what if it doesn't matter? What if you think that you're going to become this best version of yourself and society still don't want you?
Mm.
Right? Like, what if they still don't want to live next door to you? They still don't want to hire you. They still don't and what folks don't realize is a lot of folks still struggle with that, right? And having to fight through that is what it takes for folks to be able to start to really get on their healing journey. You know what I mean? That's why when I was invested to becoming the best version of myself, I used to get a lot of pushback from folks who were from our circumstances. And they weren't doing it because they were hating. They were doing it because they were really, in their mind, they were trying to look out for me. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
you think that you're about to read these books and become the best version of yourself and work on your habits and all this other stuff. And when you get out there, you're gonna be just like such and such, man. He can't this he was only out for a year. He couldn't find a job, he couldn't find housing and all this other stuff. So in their mind, they're trying to save me the trouble. They're like, man, listen, man, you ain't listen, you're gonna be right back on the block, man. You gotta be this is that. And at first, I was incensed by the pushback, like, wow, like, come on, man, you hating, right? But then as I started to heal and understand the things that I was fighting and trying to grow through, and the barriers I was trying to tear down as I continued to heal. I realized, it lets you into what other folks are dealing with as well, and you can see why. Because before I got released, I had those vague thoughts too. I was like, man, what if, right? Like, you know what I mean? I'm doing all this. Like, what if that don't matter? But and so being able to connect to their humanity in that regard and understand. Um, so I think um getting permission to heal was important for me. That was big for me to realize that too. I know I realized that heal. like when we talk about healing, a lot of times we speak about it like it's individual. Like that's stuff that you're gonna have to do. Like you're gonna have to go heal and you're gonna have to do all that other stuff. But then I realized that or it was shared with me that healing is social. Like all our trauma came from social interactions. It didn't come like organically within ourselves. We didn't
Yeah.
get these abandonment issues by just magically appearing us. Like this came from a caregiver abandoning us, right? Or we feeling abandoned by a caregiver. This came from trauma that we get from abuse or for from whatever the trauma place that it came from. It came from somewhere else. And so I start to see the wisdom in understanding that healing comes from community too. When somebody sees you and when somebody makes space from you, that's healing, right?
Hmm.
When somebody says you matter, you know what I mean? Not in words, but in actions, then that matter. That's powerful. And so I think that was important for me to understand, and is that healing isn't just individual; it's social. It's a community endeavor.
Absolutely, man. Again, so much wisdom in what you're saying, and I love that you're speaking from your experience, and these are really important things. I think I'm gonna translate that into my language here, and you can let me
Absolutely.
know if it resonates or not. I think what I hear is loving community is important. To be loved, to be valued. When someone loves you, they have empathy for you. They can put themselves psychologically or mentally in your shoes. They can feel for you and want to do something and have compassion for you. Because you're right, man. A good life, we're all fallible creatures.
Yes.
We all have the potential for fallibility. We have the potential to do harm. We have the potential to do good. But what environment do we find ourselves in? In those conditions, and those people who are in our environment, those caretakers, they have their traumas and mental illnesses and etc. And or they're on their square. They have things together, and they create an environment that increases the likelihood of a person moving in a more positive direction, while some environments are increases the likelihood of someone moves in a so-called negative direction. And so we all like I love it. Community is everything. We're not isolated beings. My crazy making, yes, I own it, and it just didn't pop into me out of nowhere. It was created in an environment, a context that I found myself in, and I'm using I here just because all of us we have these potentials inside of us, and it is the community. It's our immediate community I was speaking of before,
Yeah.
but it's also the community that extends out beyond it. Where do I find myself? What neighborhood did I live in? What was going on in the extended town or city, or if you grew up in a rural area?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in the state? What are the laws? What is happening? What are all of the how are all these interactions impinging on me? And I feel I'm with you. In order for us to maximize the potential for well being, you have to have loving community.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what else we can do. You have to have individuals that can look at you and say that, hey, like you mentioned earlier, we all have brilliance inside of us. Someone in my community, some people in my community say, hey, you have brilliance in you. How can I help and support you? That happened to me, man. I grew up small farm town, rural kid. Um, Man, I didn't know much of nothing about the world. I played football and stuff like that, but I didn't really get out. I literally didn't get out very much at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I had teachers who were saying that, hey, you're good at math. There's something inside of you. You seem like a good kid. I'm going to encourage you. Or when I got in situations where I'm, doing something I ain't had no business doing, um, they would pull me to the side. Now my temperament was such that I was willing to listen.
Right.
And I did grow up very religious. So all that part of my environment was very good for me.
Mm-hmm.
But those people pulled me to the side. I had mentors, guidance counselors, math teacher. They were like, hey, they kept pouring into me like, you should go to school. You should go to school. I'm like, oh, okay, then. I'm like, what am I going to go to school for? Because, I literally didn't know. Oh, you should be an engineer. And I'm like, oh, okay, then. I didn't know what a damn engineer was. I'm not making this up. I literally didn't know what an engineer was. And I was like, well, you should be an engineer because you're good at math. I was like, okay. They helped me fill out my application, man. They helped
Mm-hmm.
me fill out the student loan application. They helped me fill out the application to the school, the student loan application. They went out and found scholarships for me. So I'm like, I made it through school, and it really blew my mind, and I learned a whole lot, which I've mentioned on this podcast before. But I'm bringing all this up to say that I agree with you 100%, man. Because my life is a testament to like, wow, what if those people
Right.
would not have said, I don't think I would have done anything too crazy, but my mind would not have been expanded the way that it has been. And my desire to want to give back to community and do something good in the world, those people planted that seed in me because they found empathy in me when I did dumb stuff. They're like, come on, man. Come on, son. You know better. You don't need to do that. And pulling me to the side and say, hey, I see something in you. That
Mm-hmm.
kept pushing me and encouraging me. We need that. And that is for me, I'm with you. That is a important piece of a good life, of a life well lived. It's not just about me, it's we. And it's the context of the community that's created around me and the community that I help create around others that's going to influence or impact a person's capacity to live a good life. I'm with you, brother. 100%, man.
Absolutely, bro. Um, and I'm glad you brought up too about the the part the systems play,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's so important, especially the way that these systems have been weaponized against our community, right? Because like you said earlier, it was my parents had trauma. You know what I mean? Like to my dad to grow up in Jim Crow. You know what I mean? Like he had a particular experience in his life that impacted his ability to show up emotionally. It impacted the way in which he parented, right? Everything seemed like life or death for him. You know what I mean? And so which but and so I think just to understand his story, I know he's passed now, and um I'm just glad I was able to come home and be with him before he passed. That was really important for me. But being able to really lean into our relationship and build our relationship in a way that, and hear his story, right? How many folks have parents and you don't know their story?
Exactly.
Right? Like you don't know what they've been through. Like all we know is what our interactions were, but you don't have the context of why they were like that. And so that was a gift for me to be able to take care of him, but also hear his story and connect to his humanity, and everything makes better sense then. And so it was healing for our relationship and for us. So it was good. You know what I mean? And so you see how he had trauma, and that showed up in his ability to parent. But and that's how it impacts us all. These systems show up in a way, and we gives us these trauma, and that shows up. But then we live in a system that points their finger at the end result, and don't really put much energy into how we got there.
Mm-hmm.
And so because they still talking about pull yourself by your bootstraps, and I appreciated MLK when he said, but some folks don't have boots. And
Exactly.
so that's a horrible expectation, right? But it's real. And so we internalize our circumstances. So we're not doing well. We internalize that because we get pushed into our head. If we just work hard, if this is that and the other, we'll be good. And then when that doesn't happen, we start to internalize that, right? And instead of internalizing, or instead of really looking at the systems that created this circumstance. This parent can't be there for her child in a way that she wants to because she got to work 3 jobs. Like let's be real. Like I don't know what you expect her. Like and she's still the working poor. She's still paycheck to paycheck with 3 jobs. This is capitalism. You know what I mean? These are off the branch of capitalism. This isn't about how much she loves her child and how much she you know what I mean. If she could be there in the way that she wanted to be, she would be. And we need living wage jobs. There should be no circumstance in any society where you have to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't even make mathematical sense. There's not enough hours in a day. You do what I mean? And so, and childcare is like having a mortgage,
For more.
right? You know what I mean? And so, I think that for us, it's like when we talk about living well, I think we have to heal, right? We have to, because if we don't heal personally, from our unhealed trauma, then it doesn't matter what you have.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to feel at peace. And so you're going to have to do that. But aside from that, that's the most important. We got to do our work, but we have to also do the work at pushing a society to be an environment that's conducive to us healing, that's conducive to us being able to live life in a way, to live life well. And so I think that that's part of the work, right? It's
Yeah.
our work, and it's how do we dismantle some of these systems of oppression that reinforce these negative aspects to our environment that incentivize the results that we're getting.
Absolutely. It's all about transforming the nutrients in the environment where that seed is going to sprout.
Mm,
And I think you're right. That's it. How do we create the incentives? And I think as African American, I think I always tell folks, like, you want to study human suffering, you want to study a lot about healing and how to overcome healing. Look at the African American experience. And I think if you think about, some people, black folks, and I get it, this idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, that's one piece of the puzzle, but it's not all of it.
yeah.
Because again, if you don't have the boots, for instance, because it's me as an individual. So okay, what can I do as an individual to raise my agency? So
Yes.
what in the environment can I create in that environment that is conducive for this person to embrace their agency and have a desire for something better? Okay, that requires an environment. What environment are we giving them? Now, that requires other people, the culture, the
Mm,
set of ideas, the collective set of ideas that those people around a person has. That's going to influence. Now, what influenced that culture? That culture is influenced by its history, its
mm,
experience, the traumas that the parents have experienced, and what they grew up in. What my parents grew up in too in the South, Jim Crow and man, I don't know, all kinds of crazy stuff, and how, that influenced their story, their narrative, and they adapted that narrative like those brothers that you experienced in prison. They adapt a narrative that if that's for survival. Why would I tell myself that I can have more when I know I can't?
right.
You have someone that's in the South, they go and they try to go do this and they're constantly being rejected. They're constantly being rejected. They go move up north and they try to get a home and then you got redlining and they
Mm,
get screwed over for that. At some point, some people just like, fuck it, man. I give up. And so it's easy. Black, white, doesn't matter.
right.
Particularly, I'm going to talk about black folks who do this. It's easy for you to say, well, we just got to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap. I agree. We do need to do that. And You cannot assume that a person don't care, they're not trying enough, or something is, it's just that they don't have the amount of self, what's the word, self respect to do it. They don't
Yeah.
have enough dignity to do it. And I'm like, that's easy for you to say because you don't understand the narrative in their mind, the conditions that they grew up with. Yes, and certain, and there's another part of this that some people neglect to talk about is our temperament, what we came here with. Some people have a tendency to, I'm sure you know people that just strong, man. They can push through anything. They
Yes.
just came here with that. A lot of people didn't. So if a lot of people didn't come with that, you can't expect them to be able to withstand things that you feel like you were able to withstand. So we have to be careful, like you're saying, about yes, we need individual agency and we need to find a way to have desire to make our lives better. But if we don't talk about the context, and that context is cultural, the groups
Mm.
of people around, there's a healing around the story. You have to change your narrative, your story. You mentioned something earlier about habits. You have to change the habit of mind.
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever tried to change anything understands as an individual that is hard to do, to change a habit. Now you expect that community to change its habit. That's going to take some work because that requires healing work, digging into your history, understanding yourself, having compassion for yourself, having compassion for your parents. And the other piece is are the systems, the social systems that are in place that you have to change. And the only way those are going to change is that the community of individuals figure out a way to think about how do we what are the favorable conditions, what are the things that we can do to incentivize a more positive direction, a life that's worthy of living.
Mm.
Okay, then now as a community, how can we influence the infrastructure, the systems?
Yeah.
How do we change the infrastructure so that the infrastructure can also create these favorable conditions? But I feel like the most important thing, well, all of it is important, but the thing that we have the greatest amount of control over is changing our narrative, the conversation that we're having, the work that
Mm.
you're doing, changing our narrative, and then building a community of people that can buy into the narrative. Now, from that narrative, how do we create the infrastructure? And that infrastructure may be getting involved in local politics,
Yeah.
national politics, or whatever it may be. But it starts with defining or having a working definition of what it means to live well. And all the stuff that you've mentioned around healing, it requires a lot of healing. And that healing work, it sounds like that's what you're doing in your work. Um, it's encouraging this healing and rethinking about how we see things and the story that we are telling ourselves. And if we can collectively do that, then we can have a greater impact on transforming the infrastructure that is impinging on us, that creates the have a garden, like you have a little box garden that creates the box. That's the infrastructure. You
Hmm.
have to be able to change that. But if not enough people are not interested in changing it, it's not going to shift and change. So that work that you're doing and naming it and talking about it and bringing these ideas to bear is what's going to facilitate a community that does better, that lives better. Does that make sense? Or am I just
No, it
babbling,
do.
brother? I don't
No,
know.
you popping it. I really appreciate. Um, I think it is so such an important conversation to have, and healing is such a it's a simple premise, like
Right.
to understand like what you have to do, but it's so complicated in execution, right? Like
Yeah.
it's and I think um that's the hard part, right? And that's why this is going to be life work. And we're going to
Yes.
be fighting through this. I always say this about healing. I always say like healing is like, let's say healing is like a surgery. Like it's a surgery that you want, that it's a surgery that you tell other people about, you advocate for, like everybody should get this surgery, like it's your life is going to be better and all this other stuff. Um, but when you get on the operating table for the surgery, no matter how invested and how much you're gonna squirm. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, getting close to what the actual problem is, you're gonna squirm more, and some will fight and want to get off the table. You know what I mean? And so, and these are I'm not talking about people who don't aren't connected to healing. I'm talking about people who understand how valuable it is, who know it, who's willing to do the work, who showed up to the doctor appointment early, who but as soon as they got put up on that hospital bed, like, well, hold on, man, I didn't know you was gonna do that. That hurts. That hurt right there. Hold on, and that's the difficulty. Is even the best case scenario, it's hard. You
Thank
know
you
what I
for
mean?
saying that. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And no, and I think it's and I think and so I think for us to be able to, and I always like to say that because I always want us to give ourselves grace, right? Like, you're not going to show up perfectly, man. And there is no society where anybody does show up perfectly. And quiet is kept. The society was built in a way, this shame culture was built in a way to make you feel like that, to get in a shame spiral because you're not showing up perfectly, which inevitably makes you stop showing up at all, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's important for us to be able to give ourselves grace. I'm not even talking about anybody else, but there's a magical thing that happens when you start to give yourself grace. The grace you're willing to give other people start to expand too. You know what I mean? And so, because you start to connect to your humanity, then you start to connect to other people's humanity. You start to understand, like, okay, you know what? You know what I'm saying? Like, they on their journey, but I understand how hard the journey is. So just because they showed up in a way today and they bled out and they got beside it, that doesn't, we don't throw them away as a human being. We don't, that's what's wrong with the binary good and bad people. Because
Mm-hmm.
you look for reasons to put somebody in the bad people column. And then once they're in the bad people column, all the good stuff they do don't even matter anymore. You know what I mean? That's the problem. We're not binary. You do what I'm saying? We all make mistakes every day. You know what I mean? The problem isn't in, I always say what shows that you're doing the work isn't that if you make a mistake or not. It's what you do when you make a mistake. That's what
Absolutely.
shows you that you're doing the work. You know what I mean? There is no expectation to show up perfectly.
Oh, beautiful, man. So, audience, you've heard this from different contexts. No one is saying this is easy.
Yeah.
And what I love about this conversation is the complexity of what it is that we're uh, exploring here.
Yeah.
Is it is not easy if you just think a little bit about it. Of course, it's not easy to change. I can think of in terms of habit. To change any habit, man, it's difficult. I used to use this analogy of like the Grand Canyon. So you got this thing that's been going on. It's well greased, well practiced, and you go out there and like, okay, I'm gonna go change. And it's like, okay, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna not re-navigate? What's the word? Uh, change the direction of redirect the flow
Calibrate.
of the Colorado River.
Oh,
How are
oh,
you going to do that? You're going to go out there with a hoe by yourself and start digging. And you think that's going to just do it. Just go out there a couple of times and it's going to change everything. No. You got to start slow.
mm,
Eventually, you get a backhoe. You get support to help you. And you start to change those habits, that way
yeah.
of being. And it's hard. Every time you show up, you don't want to do it until
Mm,
you get in the habit of showing up and pushing yourself and challenging yourself. And that requires, I think, what you said earlier that started with community. We
yeah.
need each other, people. You need a group of people who support you, who can empathize with you, who can care for you, who can look at your imperfections and say, you know what? How can we help? How can I help with you? How can I help give you the condition? It doesn't mean I'm going to tolerate foolishness. No, we're not saying that either. Because someone who's engaging in foolishness, we're not getting at their pain. They're doing it because they figure they can manipulate you. Like, you come with strong boundaries and also loving strong boundaries and tender boundaries. And
Mhm.
that is what's going to help a person say, yes, I can do this. Thank you. I can do this. Oh, I can, you're holding me. I have value. Oh, I have this brilliance inside of me. No one ever did. No one ever reflected that back to me. I
Yeah.
was never given permission. Thank you. That requires a loving community. Your story and our story are very different in many respects, but similar. Hey, Black folks in America, man, there's a very strong common thread here in
Right.
our story. Nonetheless, we have slightly different. You grew up in an urban environment. For one, I grew up in a rural, small farm town, um, and you had different experiences. But ultimately, what helped us on our journey is people, loving community.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says, "Hey, man, you can do this. I believe in you. I value you. And you can value yourself. And I'm going to hold you. I'm going to be here for you. Have you forgiven yourself? Can you forgive yourself?" Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful that someone can do that. And for me, a life worthy of living, it's not isolated from a loving community that's willing to support and nurture you throughout a lifetime of making mistakes, a lifetime of, like you say, every day. Every day we're making mistakes of some sort. And it's how we relate to those mistakes. How do I respond to those mistakes? How do I learn how to respond to those? It's based on the community around me. How did the community respond to those various mistakes? Did I have someone come pull me to the side and be like, "Hey, when life is this way, these are some things. Here are some tools that you can use to help you along the way"? That comes from a community. Yeah, you can read it in books, and that's community too. That's some person put down their ideas in a text. So you have to have some interactions with another being. I won't say have to. It behooves us to have interactions with other beings
Yeah.
that's going to allow or that's going to facilitate a life worthy of living. And then a part of that for a lot of us, I think everybody, but definitely from you and I, from the African American context, there's so much healing. There's so much healing that needs to happen. And it is so important to have a loving community around us to facilitate that healing. That healing process, folks, in and of itself is a good life.
Yes,
The
it is.
going through the healing is beautiful. To go through transformation, as painful as painful as going all the way, look, yep, I'm going to get this surgery. I'm going to get down and I'm squirreling. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do it. That whole process is a quote unquote life worthy of living, that you're willing to put yourself in a situation that's going to make your life better, even though it's hard as I don't know what. That is a life worthy of living. A life worthy of living is not just feeling good all the time. It is a life of healing. And for a lot of the people in our community, that's ground foundational. Just like, I just want to heal. You know what? You're living a good life. And as you heal, a lot of other things are going to get better in your life. Other things will start to get better. You'll feel better. You'll create better relationships. You'll
Mm-hmm.
start to ask that question. I'm healing now. Now I believe that my life can be better, that life is worthy of living. And then you start to ask that question, what does that mean now? What does it mean? Oh, and then you start to do things. You create your environment such that you can support that. Or if you have children, you're like, you know what? I'm going to create the conditions for my child that I didn't have, but I'm going to give them the conditions that facilitate a life worthy of living based on what I've learned and based on my own healing process. It's a beautiful thing what you're saying, man.
No, I appreciate that, and I think that's so real. Um, and I think it's, um, I think all parents would want would give would create those things if they knew what the some
Yeah.
because I think some don't even know what that looks like,
Nope.
right? And that's why it's about sometimes a lot of this work is about reframing and having trying to look through things through different goggles to have a different framing. You know what I mean? So we think about things in our space around change. We always say people don't change, they heal. right?
Mm-hmm.
And we say that as a means because all the elements we like as we've been talking about are they're the same in a lot of respects, but it's just the way that you look at it. You know what I mean? It's just like if you want somebody to change behavior, right? It's uh um it's like what's important is for they need to heal what is making that behavior their best option. You know what I mean? If like we're talking about the manipulating, some folks manipulate and some folks do, right? And but to understand that they're manipulating because they've lived a life where they've had to get their needs met,
Yes.
right? And so it's like so that and it's good to know that not to not have a boundary, you still got to have firm boundaries, right? Because that in itself is love. So they can what you're doing is you're modeling a boundary. They're like, oh, you can, that's a real thing. Like I can, you know what I mean? Like, okay. And so you're modeling a boundary. They might be mad in the moment, but you modeled something that they could place into their lives as they move forward. But I think at the end of the day, it's I think that that's the significance of that's why it's so important for us to stay connected to each other's humanity. You know what I mean? Because if we're always in a place and staying connected to that, then when folks do things, even when they cause harm or harm to us or whatever the case, and we can stay connected, I think that what we do next is going to be better informed and it's going to have a better opportunity to be life enriching than us just responding because the reason why shame culture and domination and throw people away culture is so prominent is because it's convenient. You know what I mean? Like if something is problematic, it just seems easier to get rid of them. You know what I mean? It seems easier to just the folks that you deem to be problematic in our society to throw them in boxes or throw them in penitentiaries and stuff like that. Yeah, it got its roots in racism and it got its roots in the place, and just so happens we're disproportionately represented in there. So it's really, you feel what I'm saying, and that's why I'll caution folks about this fake binary about good, bad people. Us reinforcing that hurts us
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have the determination who the good and bad people are in this society. And so for us to reinforce that line of that framing could be is problematic. And plus it's not true. You feel what I'm saying? I believe that uh, um circling back, I being able to support folks as they transition back to the community um is has given me insights and understandings of what that looks like, right? And what it takes to stay free, and the things that when they're not in place, how they backslide. And so when you're close to somebody during this process, they get released. You know what I mean? They know what they want to do. They want to work. They want to put this together. They want to take care of their kids. This is how they come out. You know what I mean? After 30, 40 job applications and they can't, they're all these no's and they can't find safe housing. You know what I mean? So they're stuck in transitional housing, right? What ends up happening is, and some folks might not really realize or understand this, every single job application or interview they have to do, regardless if it's housing or if it's employment, they have to convince this person that they have to relive whatever they did that sent them to the penitentiary, and that person becomes uh, an unlicensed judge. This
Mm.
person could judge you in this moment and be the reason why you don't get this housing. They'd be the reason why you don't get this job. You know what I mean? And and so what folks do is what that psychologically they take themselves through to have to get themselves up to go there to get rejected again. Granted, they've already reinforced in their mind that folks, the society don't want them anyway. Just watch TV. Just watch how they talk about it on TV. Just watch how it's reflected. You know what I mean in social media. Just look at the sentiments, and you'll see where this ain't coming out of nowhere. Folks ain't just being like, folks don't want me. This is reinforced. You know what I mean? Tough on crime and super predators and all this other stuff that they've been pushing over through the years. And so when I see this person, trying, fighting, you know what I mean, doing everything they got to do for what's required of them through their probation, and fighting to going to these job interviews, and realizing that, you know what I mean, they have to still pay their LFOs. That's the, you know what I mean. They have to still pay restitution. They have to still pay these things, these legal financial obligations, and they have to put the pieces of their life together. Um, you start to see that it gets hard, and then what happens is they, after the 30 or 40th denial, what their coping mechanism was probably was using, right? That used to be their coping mechanism. You know what I mean? And so that's how they deal with their pressure and deal with their unhealed trauma. That's how they deal with that. And so after all of this fighting and trying and re-traumatizing themselves and all this rejection and stuff, now they like, okay, I'm just gonna use just a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go tomorrow. I'm gonna still go to these job interviews. I'm gonna still put these pieces together. I just need this because, you know, they rationalize to themselves, like, I just need to get past this bump, man. This is hard, man. I've got my CCO on my helmet. I got all this stuff on me. Like, I just need to do this, right? And then they do it. And then they do it again. And now they're using. And now they're gravitating toward the people that they used to navigate with because they're not going to judge them. Right. And so now
Mm-hmm.
they're back in this circumstances. They're using, and they get rearrested, and now they're back. The society look at them like, look at this dumb person, man. You had your chance. This is that and the other. You messed it up. You just making bad choices, right? But when you're close enough, you'll see psychologically the journey that this person went through in the fight, and they just didn't have the fight. They gave up, and they gave up on themselves. And so we got to ask ourselves as a society, are we creating a network or a space or an environment that is conducive to them being successful? Because sometimes even they do get jobs. Some of the jobs that will hire folks with backgrounds exploit folks. They hire
Mm-hmm.
folks with backgrounds because they know that you have they could just call your CCO. You know what I mean? And so they can get out of they have you working crazy hours. May have demands of you that aren't right in any real sense of the word, but they know that you're in this position that you really can't fight for yourself or advocate for yourself. And so they get exploited. And so they might quit, you know what I mean? Or they might just fall out, get the use in, and now they back in the cycle again. When you're close, you can see the humanity, man, of folks, right? And what's important about us staying connected to the humanities, we can actually fix the problem. If we want
Yep.
folks not to go back, then we can fix it, but we can't fix it by pretending like, you know what I mean, like, well, you're a convict and you're a felon and all this other stuff, and you deserve anything that happens to you. Like, is this the society? Like, 90% of folks are getting released. They're coming back to our community, you know?
Mm.
And so we have to, how do we create a society that's conducive to folks being successful when they transition out? Because when they're successful, that allows for us to be successful as a
Yes.
society. You know what I mean? And so I just like to highlight, I always want to stay connected to the humanity of folks. You know what I mean? And understanding what I used to say trauma informed, but it's like a looking at it through a deficit. So being healing informed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at situations from a healing informed lens and understanding of what we need to do as a society to make this a world that we all want to live in, that all our kids can thrive in. And I think that's kind of, um I think that's the goal, and I think that's the mission. And I think, and I'm hoping that folks could make space for the humanity of others, even folks that in your mind you might think is a bad person, or you might be able to justify that they should be thrown away. I'm just want to invite folks to be able to stay connected to humanity, because there's something that happens when you deny somebody else's humanity. You lose a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of yours.
Exactly. You dehumanize yourself. You
Yes.
dehumanize someone else, you dehumanize yourself. Man, this is beautiful, man. Been beautiful. Keeping in touch with our humanity. And I think this the example that you gave of, formerly incarcerated people coming out and in their process, their difficulties, their challenges, and not being given the favorable conditions that are conducive to their healing and their capacity to live a better life. And
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're doing that well, period. And I think our educational system is not doing it well. Obviously, I mean, look at the society, and we
Yeah,
can, again, we can just take a lens on the, take a close look at the African American experience. And, we still got, you look at the statistics, yeah, they're the same as they were fucking 100 years ago, 20, at least 50, 60 years ago.
yeah,
And, what is going on there? There's a failure that is happening on so many levels because the conditions are not being created that are favorable for a better life. Um, I don't think we're, as a culture, I mean, I think globally as human beings, where we are in our evolution, we don't value human life. We so easily dehumanize one another. We don't look at each other's humanity. So it's not surprising, unfortunately, that people who are formerly incarcerated get treated that way. Because in a more subtle way, I think we do that as a society in general. How did so many people get in there in the first place? Yeah, there were certain prejudices and that facilitated that. And beyond the prejudices, there are there I think we live in a culture where we almost have to dehumanize another person if our objective is to extract as much as I can from them so I can have financial gain. So it's embedded in the cultural narrative and the work that you're doing, in my humble part here, trying to have these conversations, trying to change the narrative. Like, we have to change the way we're seeing things. We have to think about it. Just at least have the conversation, explore the ideas about what it means to live a good life, to live well, not just for myself, but in general for everybody. And even if I did just want to focus on myself, I have to include community and all of the various relationships that make me who I am. And I love that you started with community. You started with looking at seeing each other's humanity, and we're ending with that. We're coming to a close here. It's been great, man. And any final words that you have that you would like to share with the audience?
yeah. I mean, you started off. You asked about what inspires, right? And I just want to speak to there's this community member, man. She's a beautiful spirit, and like she's amazing. And um, she lost two of her sons to gun violence,
Mm.
right? Just years apart. Like it was devastating as I mean, for her and for us as a community, but um, and I can speak to the strength that it takes her to be able to deal with these horrible tragedies and her ability to be able to persevere and push through and be able to show up every day. But I think because she is strong and she is amazing in those regards. But I think what for me, what really so inspiring that I look to every day is she's been through all of this. She has all this difficulty and trauma and turmoil and dealing with what she had to deal with, and she never closed her heart, man.
Mm.
And I think that that's the most powerful thing. I think that's inspiring for me because through all the difficulties and the difficult things that I might have to traverse and go through and deal with, um, I want to be like her, man. I want to be able to go through this, whatever happens to me in my life, and I want to be able to do so. Hopefully, with the probably not with the grace that she was able to do it, but at least from the perspective of not closing my heart through this process. Because when we close our heart, we lose.
Yeah.
When we close our heart, now we'll never have the things that we aspire to have. It's not possible to have love when your heart is closed. It's not possible to have these deep rooted relationships when your heart is closed. This is not even possible, right? And so really in a strategy to protect ourselves, we're really denying ourselves all the things that probably mean the most to us, and as the things that we started in the conversation that really informs our how well we're doing, you know. And so I just want to end it on that the fact that regardless of what we have to go through, and you know, the unfairness, the injustice of it, um, let's not close our heart, because closing our heart closes us off from more than just the possibility of getting hurt. It closes us from the possibility of getting love. And so thank you for making the space for me, Broderick. I really appreciate it, man. This has been a, a really important and impactful conversation for me, man. And I appreciate how you hold space, bro. So thank you.
Man, thank you so much. That was so beautiful, man. That's a beautiful life, man. All these things that you've brought up and shining your light, man, and to end with that, yeah, that's a beautiful life. If we can live our lives and not close our hearts and be open, and it's been great, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.